Hello, and welcome to the Doctor Who review. Heaven Sent. It was great. I loved it. It wasn't. It. I loved it. I did. It didn't have explosions. I can see why some people would have hated it. I'm doing my usual load of prerequisites, and you might like this or you might not like that. So let's just get them all out of the way. There wasn't a lot of action. It was incredibly slow paced. There was no Daleks. There was no Cybermen. There was no companions. There was no comedy. Blah 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 blah. Terrible, terrible, terrible. But oh my God, it didn't miss those things at all, because instead you had this beautifully constructed, beautifully filmed, and I want to talk about that a lot later, mystery story, of the Doctor trapped in his own private hell, and trying to escape. And it was long as well. I think it was it must have been longer than a normal episode. I haven't actually checked, but it felt like longer than the usual 45 minutes. And they really gave this story room to breathe. It was very, very kind of slow. He came out of the kind of teleporter. He had to kind of get a little look around, and then slowly, and then he found his enemy, and then he avoided the enemy, and then he had the mystery about that, and then he had to think about room 12, and then he spent ages digging, and other way around, he spent ages digging, and then he did this, and then he did that, and it was. I've said it before with the advantage of two-parters, is that you get time for all of the minor companions to get to know them, like Ghosts episodes. We got to know a few of those extra characters in a lot more depth, and they did the same thing today, but without characters. They did it with moments. They let each moment have room to breathe. I mean, how long did the Doctor actually kind of spend changing his clothes? Probably only a minute. But in an action-paced, fast-paced episode, it would have been a run, look over, clothes, cool, change, done. But in this one, they gave everything enough time to become a moment, something that sits in our minds as well as his. And there were lovely little touches. I mean, I don't know if it's Sherlock or whether it's Doctor Who, but Doctor Who has a mind palace. Isn't that what Sherlock kind of calls it? He goes somewhere to kind of have his own conversations. So let's talk about the Clara thing. They obviously included Clara, but without including Clara. And we had lots of kind of conversations last week. We kind of said, look, Clara's dead. Let her stay dead. Otherwise, it becomes kind of meaningless. And I think what they did today was a really good way of acknowledging that she was gone. First of all, the Doctor's rage. He turned up. If this is you, I'm going to get you. Blah blah blah. And then having her still around, and even her face appearing at one point, and lots of kind of shot from her backside. Sadly, not her backside, but you know what I mean. But of course, she is still dead, and it also helped again to reinforce the Doctor's and Clara's relationship in that she is the one that he needs when he thinks things through, and she's actually still there, kind of in his mind palace. He communicates with her even when she's not there, and kind of thinks, what would she say at this moment? And it helps again to kind of reinforce their close, interdependent, non-romantic relationship. That the fact that even when she's gone, she is still in his mind, and she is part of his thought process. And the Mind Palace itself was a really nice way of having kind of multiple, how do you describe it? Sceneries, because we were in a castle basically for the whole thing. So to break up the monotony of castle, we occasionally popped to the TARDIS, which is, of course, wasn't the actual TARDIS. It was his, little kind of Mind Palace. Which is really nicely done. Every time he's about to die, this idea, and you often kind of think with the Doctor, how would you survive? And they actually refer to it. Do you remember back in the first Missy episode this year, they had the doctor being about to be attacked by something, and then they kind of said, and Missy was kind of saying to Clara, well, how did the doctor survive? And they revealed that doctor must have done lots of kind of calculations and worked out the frequency that he needs. And it kind of, it feels like an impossibility of him to do those kind of calculations, unless, of course, he has this kind of ability in his mind to slow things down and think things through. And it makes perfect sense. It works. It might not be logically possible, but, it within the realms of the character, it makes sense that he's just such a genius that he actually has to have a way of forming his own thoughts and containing them and running them through and scribbling on a blackboard and all those kind of things. And I love the way he did it as well in terms of, in fact, it's just been mentioned here, that he did it in future tense. When he was kind of speaking to Clara, he was kind of saying, oh, yes, well, I definitely escaped that. Of course, he hasn't actually escaped it yet. And then he has to kind of be like, right, so I need to tell you how I escaped that. Well, I guess I'd better work it out, which is really nice. It's his ego and his way of kind of thinking it through. And they've done this a few times now, the assumption that you will live. And he even did it with Davros, the child Davros right at the beginning, when you believe you will, believe you're going to be, I can't remember the exact phrasing, sorry if I'm getting it wrong, but, one of the doctor's survival mechanisms is believe that you're going to survive. And then you look for that way out, rather than kind of giving up. Which is really nicely done. I have to say, I'm not binging up my own trumpet here. I'm just kind of pointing out. I guessed the twist right from the very start. So it wasn't actually much of a twist for me. It was more kind of confirmation. And the reason why I guessed it is because you saw that hand right from the very. Well, for two things. First of all, blimmin' Lee and Pete mentioned before the episode, we haven't really got a bad guy this week. Thanks. So I already knew that the bad guy couldn't really be a bad guy, even though there was blatantly a bad guy all through the episode. But, so I knew it was going to be something weird, something kind of mindy. And then you saw that bloodied hand right at the beginning, pulling on a lever or a teleport or something like that. But you didn't see who it was. And your mind starts running. Well, why would you not see that person's hand? Why would you not see the owner of the hand? Because if it was an enemy, why not see there was obviously going to be some sort of reveal with who it was. So it either had to be someone we knew already, it had to be someone that we knew already. And the only logical person was him. But that said, even though I'd guessed the twist right from the beginning, it actually still works. It very much works as a story and a narration of the Doctor's experiences there. I mean, obviously, if you didn't guess the twist, then it's like, oh my God. But even if you, speaking of someone that kind of went, I bet it's him going round and round and round and round and round and round again. It still wonderfully worked as a narrative because you had the Doctor's initial bolshiness, and then the Doctor's fear, and then the Doctor's acceptance, and then that wonderful bit where he kind of said, well, so if I lead it all the way to one end and then run all the way to the other end, I've got myself 86 minutes to eat, sleep, and all that kind of stuff. And it was, the fact that he's there so long that he actually has to start thinking about kind of primary needs, and it was just lovely done, and it was just fantastically filmed. I mean, I have some very, very, very limited experience in film, as in I was a cameraman. I was a cameraman's assistant on a very crappy kids TV show once, and I did a little course on it. And I've done some photography kind of workshops and things like that. So I know a tiny bit about cinematography. But I can appreciate when something makes me go, oh, that's beautiful. And this episode did it to me loads, whether it was the sun, I chose this picture for a reason, whether it was the sun streaming back from the Doctor, whether it was the drip dripping off the spoon, whether it was the close-up of the little kind of monocle thing dropping on the floor. Every shot, well, not every shot, that's too much of an exaggeration. So many shots were beautifully done, creating this wonderful, slow atmosphere. A beautiful atmosphere. It's like a kind of a beautiful prison. It's like, it's picturesque, but at the same time, it's terrifying. And when you got to the end sequence and the reveal, and you realize that the Doctor's going round and round and round and round and round again. And then you get to see those clips over and over again. You get to see the drip coming off the spoon. You get to see the monocle fall again. You get to see him picking up the spade. You get to see him coming out of the thing. All of those moments that had been so memorable, had been done in such a beautiful, memorable way before. You then realize why they were done that way, to make them stick in your head. So you see them again, and you kind of, you you recognize them and you appreciate them, and then it goes. And also the pacing was really, really, really slow. So when you got to that end bit where the reveal happened and the Doctor started going around through time again and again and again, it was quite an extended thing. I mean, I don't know I'd be interested to know exactly how long that kind of montage was. But it kind of started and then it carried on going a lot longer than you would have expected, because you knew where it was going from the beginning, didn't you? You knew that the Doctor was going to punch his way through that harder than diamond substance. And yet they took the time even there to make the montage long. So you didn't just have, and when it kept going up in the number of years, you're like, wow, 7,000 years, gosh, that's long. 10,000 years, whatever it went to, 20,000 years, and then all of a sudden it went to 200,000 years, and you're like, whoa, and then it started. Did it get to billions by the end? I can't remember. But it was a really long montage, and the other thing they did with it in terms of the pacing was the whole episode was so slowly paced, long scenes, and then that montage was the time when the speed of the editing finally picked up, and it picked up slowly during the whole montage, getting faster and faster and faster and faster and faster, and you've been kind of sitting there throughout the whole time kind of going, la 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 la, this slow-paced, thoughtful story, and then it draws you in because it's the first time you've had this fast-paced coming at you. It just means so much more. Plus, with all that imagery you had, all the cinematography, the light shining from this way and that way, the darkness, the lightness, the skull, the water. It was a brilliant bit of filmmaking, I think. There was I can be picky. And there's a few bits I don't quite understand, or what, like why did the whole castle reset but not the room where he was punching things, and a reference back to the whole Beethoven idea of who wrote Beethoven's Fifth, like how did the Doctor's wet clothes get there for the first time? Obviously if it's repeating, then how are they there the first time? And who wrote Bird the first time the Doctor kind of came through? Because if he left clues for himself, they only would have existed the kind of second time onwards. But maybe there was a little line I missed. Maybe there was a throwaway line here where he kind of said, I'll set the teleporter to work from this time onwards. I don't know. But I don't think it matters. I think if you want to nitpick anything, you can. But what you had there was a story to absorb you. That said, I'm not sure it's an episode I necessarily want to go back and watch again. Maybe in a few years, but because it was so slow paced, it's not one of those ones where I'm going to be kind of like, I really want to, get all the hidden meanings in there, because you get all the meanings. The actual plot line itself, when you think about it, was actually quite simple. The Doctor goes to a prison and he has to live that experience many, many, many times. So it's not what I'm going to watch over and over, but at the same time, it was, an enchanting, captivating story that still leaves us with loads of questions. Who sent him there? Why did they send him there? Was he actually ever in a real location, or was it just something in the confession dial? Was the prison itself designed to make him confess? Like, does the confession dial only exist because of that prison, and therefore that's why it's called the confession dial, because it makes you confess things over and over and over? Why is the Doctor a hybrid? Is he a hybrid because of something we don't know about yet, or are we finally making reference back to the whole Paul McGann being half human Doctor thing? So the Doctor's going to reveal that he's always been a hybrid all along. Why is now the Doctor so angry with Gallifrey? Earlier he was like, I'm desperate to get home, and now he's turned up there and he's going to be like, I'm the one that's going to do vengeance upon you. Is it just because of Clara being killed, or is there something else there? Or there's loads of kind of questions, but good questions. Sometimes an episode leads you kind of going, well, what's that all about, and why this? And an example of a bad example of that would be that Sleep No More episode, where you get to the end and go, was that the end? Did he actually beat them? Or questions that frustrate you, whereas these are questions that make you go, I really want to see the next one. Good questions. And I did that thing. I paused it. I didn't look at the coming up next week. So if no spoilers, don't tell me. I'm assuming it's going to be Gallifrey based. But it It was cool. Jen Devine has just said that, me could mean a Shildir also, but I really hope not, because that would suck, because she sucks, let's be honest. Well, okay, in my view, she hasn't been done very well, and I've had enough of her. Like, I don't want to talk about Shilder more. If you want to see my views on a Shilder, go back and watch the previous reviews. I want to talk about this episode, and it was a story. I mean, just think about Capaldi as well. He, as an actor, he held our attention. Well, not everyone's attention. Some people will find it boring, but he held our attention for what must have been close to an hour by himself, more or less, with a little kind of view of Clara at one point, with a mixture of kind of dialogue and shouting out loud and mind palaces and you're with him all the way. His expressions are so expressive and yet over the top. You don't see him acting, you see the Doctor. And I often say this with Clara, that or she first suggested to me that when you look at someone and go, oh, they're acting really well, they're actually not, because you've noticed that they're acting. But with Capaldi, I don't see Capaldi. I see the Doctor. I see his anger, his confusion, his expressions, his indignation, his character traits. He was great, and I think a lot. I'm not often very complimentary towards Moffat, but this was one of the most unique and memorable episodes of certainly Capaldi's era, and possibly even the whole modern era. If I kind of said to you, remember the vampire episode, you got a few that you could think of, or remember the one where the Earth was invaded. You've got tons to kind of go on, but remember the one where the Doctor got stuck in his own private hell and had to relive a dungeon over 2 billion times. You'll know exactly which one I'm talking about, and this is I think the word classic episode is overused, and it's hard to know in retrospect what sticks with you. But it's a unique and treasurable episode. How about that? Although I have to say, this is not a criticism at all, but they obviously used Cardiff Castle and one of the others, because those of you that know will know me and the posse have done the tour quite a few times now. And, there's quite a few times I was like, I've been there. I've been in that corridor. I recognise that room. I've seen that thing. So I always have to try and forget it, though, because it does spoil it somewhat when the Doctor's in mortal peril and I'm there kind of going, I've seen that bookcase. But it's cool. Looks like Agra is having a cry about the Doctor not being half human. Maybe I haven't seen that TV movie in so long. I'm just going on what I've read and what I can remember. But I will finish there on this review. I think there weren't many. There wasn't a ridiculous number of themes to discuss. It was actually a pretty straightforward story. It was a masterclass in acting. It was brilliantly written. It was surprising if you didn't guess the twist, and it was still an inventive story even if you did. It was scary. That creature was very slow. I mean, again, again, that fear of thing. We've said this before, but things you don't see are often more scary than things you do, and the fact you couldn't see under the veil and things was, made it kind of more threatening. And it also had that lovely analogy towards death. I mean, I was wondering at one point whether the creature was going to end up just being death, something that follows you your entire life and you can never kind of escape it, always kind of going towards you, and you can kind of get yourself more distant from it, but ultimately it will always catch you. And whether that was meant to be explicitly or implicitly, or just symbolically, it was there, because obviously there has been a lot about death this series, which is weird because the whole death Cyberman thing was last time. But that was it was really nicely done. So good. I'm looking forward to next week. It's a finale, but who knows? Finales can be such a mix. Who knows? So let's just treasure this week and enjoy it. I'll be back in a minute. I'm going to be opening my loot crate, and we'll do some goofy iOS gaming as well for a little bit before bedtime. So I hope you've enjoyed this review, and if you're wherever you're watching it, Twitch, YouTube, or wherever, do give me some comments, give me some feedback, tell me what you thought, agree with me, disagree with me, and it'll be good to keep the debate going. Thank you for coming. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.